Welcome to the Higher Ed Podcast, where we explore the latest developments and emerging trends in the world of higher education. Our podcast features in-depth discussions with the industry's leading experts, providing valuable insights and actionable advice for academic leaders and executives. From designing impactful universities and establishing strong brand identities for colleges to delivering exceptional student services, we cover it all. Join us as we reimagine the future of higher education, one episode at a time.
Darren, if you want to introduce yourself really quick, and then Kirsty, and then Dr. Colin, and we'll kind of get into the dialogue.
Absolutely. So thanks for having me, Kumar, and very nice to meet you, Colin and Kirsty. Excuse me, I'm Darren Thompson. I'm not quite sure what part of the country you all are in, but you now have a brother in Phoenix. This mountain behind me is sort of a joke because it's always so hot here in Phoenix, right? So I, like many people, found my way into AI through working with startup companies. So particularly EdTech startups, and really started to learn the impact that AI has on education. Now, as educators or anyone with an education background knows, there's a lot of anxiety that comes along with how AI will impact education. So really what I began to do is learn as much as I could about AI, not only how it works, governance, and then I started to really focus on the current trends. A lot of times I engage in education folks, and I get this sense that they don't understand, like, AR is already here. It's no longer knocking at the door, right? Like it's opened the door. So really what I help people do is sort of schools to do is wrap their minds around where to begin, if you will, with an AI plan. I lead marketing for a company called Simply Taught. And Simply Taught is an AI-based platform that uses machine learning in order to solve the mismatch between the way educators teach and the way that students learn. So it studies learning behavior, uses AI, and creates a really, really strong experience. And that's just, one of the trends that we believe will, permanently impact education. So I'll take a step back a little bit and would love to hear a little bit about you all as well. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Right. Thank you for that introduction. It's good to see everybody. My name is Kirsty DiBiase, and I am currently serving as the provost at West Coast University. And so just a little bit about that. West Coast, we are a private for-profit university that prepares healthcare professionals, mainly in nursing, but we have all the way from bachelor's to the doctorate. If students want to level up with us, we are in brick and mortar, blended, and online formats. And I've been with the institution in my 7th year. And in my role, so it's interesting you say governance. So how did I get introduced? Of course, everyone was introduced to AI, with the ChatGPT, but we've been engaging with augmented reality since 2019. So we were one of the first institutions to partner with Microsoft with the HoloLens. And we use that in our anatomy courses. So we were working with them with version 1 and provided them feedback. Our students were struggling with that. The headsets, if you're familiar with those, they were heavy, they would cause vertigo, they were dizzy or headaches. So we provided that feedback to Microsoft, and then we came out with the second one. And even when the pandemic hit, we figured out a way to keep augmented reality going for our students with those headsets. So we did some work with Zoom to help them keep dissecting and using that tool because it's so immersive. Then with the pandemic, we were involved. So I know this is an AI, but this is what I'm trying to express here is this comfort level that we've had with using EdTech within our institutions. So when ChatGPT broke out on the scene last year, where were we already? So a little bit, that's why I'm giving a little bit of a ramp up here. When the pandemic hit, it was my job to secure online virtual labs for our general education, hard sciences, anatomy, physiology, chemistry, and microbiology. So I partnered with a few vendors, and we were able to do that because students couldn't come to school and do labs and couldn't do the dissections. And so that was going to impact their ability to be future nurses or other healthcare professionals that we were offering. So we needed to spring into action quickly and get that solved. So we did that. We also work with things like the anatomage table in our physician assistant program. We have a hologram that we are using, real life hologram. And real life, people with the hologram. So we've got that. We've done blast learning using Alexa so that students can say, "Hey, Alexa, read me my textbook. Hey, Alexa, quiz me on chapter 17, things like that. We do that with our nurses. And then when ChatGPT became this prominent player in the educational sector, and everyone was panicking. And I know with you, Darren, my role as provost was let's not panic. And so I actually had to, quickly get up to speed with my role because people wanted me to write policy instantaneously to limit our students and protect our students. And what are we going to do with cheating? And what about academic integrity? Robots are writing papers, and there was just so much panic. And even though we'd already had all of this experience with educational technologies inside of our curriculum, people were really frightened of this new robot. And so we had paused for a moment, and I developed the 3-prong process, which I can explain a little bit later, of how we approached and invited it to partner with us and engage with it in a healthy manner. And that is sort of where we've been, and I could go into that in more detail if you want, but we rolled all the way up to where I've ratified and formalized our work with this. We have an AI advisory council, and we are meeting on a continuous basis to look at all the new things that are coming out now. So this is something new that came out because of ChatGPT. We decided we needed to codify ourselves into a governing body that would look at these things and discuss them in a vulnerable way that's safe, so that we could look at it without judgment, and then really decide what to implement and or write policy around. Still writing in pencil. We're not inking any policies right now because everything is still happening. So that's just a little bit of my journey and a little bit of what I do. I could unpack any of that. And I hope to hear more from all of you. So,
yeah, it's no wonder that I just spoke to Ross and said, we may have to power the AI version of our podcast should be hosted by Dr. DiBiase and just powered by engine. So we would have to talk about that offline.
Okay. I don't know what any of that means, but I like how in the introduction you said I'm passionate about it, and I am passionate about this because I think it's an inflection point in education. It's been so exciting, and I've been in education, for 20-something years. And I've seen various iterations, but what's happening right now and getting to pioneer things and be a co-architect with folks like yourself that are early adopters that are seeing what's happening and want to be part of this rather than hiding our heads in the sand and moaning and wanting to go backward. I think the people that are embracing it and that are building it right now are some of the most exciting people. And so I'm excited to meet you guys and talk with you and hear what's going on in your minds. So thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Did you want me to go ahead?
Absolutely.
Colin Miller and Kirsty, thank you so much for that. Provost and Senior VP at RIMCAD. And it's actually really fascinating to have a discussion, Kirsty, with your perspective too, simply because two contexts. So I've been 19 years of higher ed, actually cut my teeth at National University in a leadership role there for 10 years, and then went on to another institution. My area of responsibility has always been enrollment growth, particularly through innovation and curriculum, new program development, and things like that. As such, actually spent a lot of effort and time working in the health sciences, building out programs, particularly on how you can deliver an authentic educational experience at a distance, which is a challenge, as you know, because there's so much sort of in-person learning that has historically been associated with those programs and those curriculum particularly. So I can't imagine, Christy, all the complexity of what you're trying to do, both for brick and mortar, campus space, plus intermixing that online experience. So there's a lot. And I remember the days of the virtual labs where you had avatars that would walk into a virtual and I remember all of that. But what's interesting about this discussion is actually, so I really spent all my time at 3 different institutions. As I said, National University, North Central University, which I was at for 6 years, and that was entirely graduate, basically, and online. A larger institution. And then now I'm at an art and design school, which I've never, I've obviously covered those areas, but I've never directly led an art and design school. And it's been a wonderful, fascinating experience. But RIMCAD is kind of like West Coast. We both have a brick and mortar institution based in Denver, but we're also majority online. And so to get back to, and obviously EdTech has always been a major part of my role because I've been focused on scalability, efficiencies as we grow enrollment, that type of thing. As it relates to AI, I think for us and for me, it's really impactful in 2 different areas. Area 1 is what is the impact that AI is having and will have on the student learning experience for both good and ill. And one of the things that I tend to think about is really, if you look at, and I hate to go back, but if you look at the introduction of really kind of the internet and Google searching and things like that, what that really engendered was a pretty profound impact on higher ed in terms of the impact on information literacy for students. All of a sudden, students had access to an entire world of information, but they didn't necessarily have the tools to understand and delineate good information from bad, to develop their own sort of muscles to go out and find information and do research. I mean, it was almost literally like having access to a physical library, but on steroids. And so if you look at the impact that, Google search and internet has had really since its inception, we're still working through it. We still have challenges with information literacy for students. We still have challenges on trying to get them to understand their own agencies in developing their intellect versus looking to others to help them skip steps in their learning and things like that. And now we have AI. And AI in that space is kind of, geometrically, exponentially increase the complexity and the impact that kind of experience can have for good and for ill, right? So AI, when used really well, can allow a student to do what was the equivalent of a month's worth of research in a day, right? So if used properly, it can be a tremendous educational tool. But if used improperly, it will allow students to elude the difficult work that we want them to do in their own educational intellectual journey. And how do we balance that? And then I think the other complexity that we have in an art and design school, but I think it's true for everyone, there is such a time lag between what we teach a student and what they're going to go do in their career, right? So we can engage with a student today. They're going to not really be in the field to go use that tool for 4 to 6 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever that cycle is. And the rapid change that we're seeing based on AI and technology means we can't really predict what things are going to look like 4 years from now when they're out in the industry. And these tools are going to be out there in an increasing part of the careers that we are going to graduate them into. So all that to say, I think something that Kirsty really highlighted is this is not something, and I know the title is AI governance, This is not something that we feel like we can revisit or look at in a single moment, come up with a policy and come up with an institutional approach and be done with. It is organic. It is iterative. It is here. There's nothing we can, I don't want to say there's nothing we can do about it because there is that good side too. But it is Pandora's box, right? So kind of what Kirsty described is an ongoing discussion that we're having across the academic community to say, where are we today? What tools are we aware of? What approaches can we take to as much as possible, encourage the proper use of AI and keep it in a sense where we want it to be as much as we possibly can. And then we need to continue to discuss it. In art and design, it's really significant because a lot of AI tools are being built particularly around creative work, right? So photography, graphic design, illustration. These are the fields that I'm responsible for producing degrees in, and these AI tools, even music production and things like that. So it's wonderfully exciting. As in, we're higher ed leaders. Like we're in this space because we like the challenge and the intellectual rigor of this world. It's a great space to be in, but it is a really complex challenge for academic institutions today and tomorrow. And I think you are going to have institutions, and you're hearing this, that sort of want to bury their head in the sand and say, it's too complex. Let's just come up with a policy that says no. And the difficulty with that is two-part. One, that no doesn't really work for the future world that we're graduating students into. And two, it doesn't really work for us to tell our students no, because it's not like they're going to listen just because we say no. So you have to have a more intentional strategy than that. And I think I'll leave it at that, but I really look forward to this discussion.
So, Dr. DiBiase, I was immediately got my attention when you said your group came together and started immediately having discussions around AI governance. I can't tell you how many times I've engaged in academic institution, and that hasn't happened as of yet. No one knows where to start, how to begin. There's all these different attitudes flying around and thoughts. How are you able to bring a group of people together at that level to start to have this conversation and really talk through governance?
One of the first things we did is I chair the Academic Integrity Committee. And so I gathered together the proctors and the faculty, and we invited others to come that were actually seeing AI firsthand in the classroom with the students, what's going on. And we just laid it all out on the table. I asked them to open up their shelves, their Canvas shelves. We looked at student work. We looked at what was happening with Turnitin. We had to validate the thresholds we were going to tolerate while we were trying to figure out what was actually happening, because it's not like business stopped. Sure. Students were still doing work. Papers were still being submitted. Everyone was tinkering with this. And so we had to look at things in real time and make some short-term immediate decisions while also looking out at the long term. So that's where I kind of used the word vulnerability. I had to get this group together to be open that we don't have the answers. None of us know what's going on. No one is an expert on this. So let's just kind of pool our experiences and see if we can make sense of what the students are trying to express to us and how can we not shut this down. So I had a 3-pronged process at first, which instead of developing policy, I said, let's just play. That was the first one. Keep playing with it. What's going on? Right after ChatGPT, there was something called Word AI that was then also generated. And so we looked at that. And I just invited everyone to download the apps, go read the articles, go into all of it and play. Nothing, everything's on the table. Nothing is forbidden. So we just played. Then I asked them to share with me the process because I wanted them to know what our students were doing. So I asked them to sort of hack it, because how can we write policy unless we actually understand the hacks around what our students might be submitting to us? And so we did that. And then we were able to write, we still haven't written very many policies, but what I did is I wrote something around a student we had to put something in the handbook, or a faculty statement and student statements. And so we got that far, and that's where we are today.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope many listeners just got the opportunity to hear how you brought these people together to start that conversation.
Yeah, it's evolved a little bit deeper than that now. So now I have the advisory committee. And so it's looked past academic integrity committee. That's where we started last year. And then I had to make sure that proctors and faculty and students all felt comfortable. So that's where we were last year. And from there, then it evolved because, as I was mentioning in my introduction, it hasn't stopped with ChatGPT. So we have all of these different things. So now we have things like teaching assistants, tutors that are AI. Mm-hmm. And so we're actually discussing this next week at our meeting. What are we going to be doing? And so we actually have some virtual assistants inside of the library for tutoring. We have, we've engaged with Ms. Gabby. She's doing some frequently asked questions. So we were finding that our tutors and faculty were being asked the same questions over and over. We felt that was sort of a safe thing to have a robot begin to answer some of these questions and save time to have the human tutor and faculty do the more rigorous, more meaningful time with the student. So the low hanging fruit, the robot can handle. What page? What was I supposed? What time was the midterm? All of those basic questions, and sort of like use up the faculty resources and time answering. So they've invited that in, and that's in our class, in our tutoring, and in our classes right now. But we haven't gotten to the point yet. We're actually just discussing the idea around a virtual teaching assistant and using it for grading. We haven't gotten there yet. Yeah.
Wow. And so it sounds like there's a very innovative side of your institution. Is it the same for you, Dr. Merler, where you're open to understanding technologies as they trend and figure out how to introduce these technologies like AI or machine learning into your ecosphere?
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think I think I would emphasize there's two reasons for that. Well, probably three. One is, again, I think like Kirsty, one of the things that we're focused on is you have to focus on developing the students' abilities in the spaces that they will encounter when they go out into their professional lives. And because of that, it can't be, I always think of the Luddites. The Luddites is, my PhD is in English Lit, but so I try to invoke old historical metaphors where I can, because I have lots of student debt. But
I use that word all the time too. I say I don't want to be a Luddite. Yeah, yep. So I'd have the same line.
So the Luddites were sort of a guild back in old England that went around destroying all the new technology equipment because they thought it was a threat to their craftsmanship, right? And you can't be a functioning and successful higher ed institution today if you're backward looking. You have to be forward looking, whether you want to or not. Now, you don't have to be we don't have to, go into science fiction and pretend like everything's going to be Star Trek with tricardists and things like that. That's not the impression. But you do have to do due diligence as much as possible. So there's that piece of it. And then two is, again, one of the things that we have to also respond to is students don't come to us completely divorced from a consumer world and a social and living world. Right. So they're not coming to us sort of coming from a mythical classroom, K-12 classroom, even if they're an adult, student. They're not coming to us from chalkboards and, that's not the environment that they're coming from. So I think they have an expectation that we are, responsive to the world in the way that we educate them. And I think in both those veins, we have to be innovative. You have to continue to responsibly, because we're an educational institution. And so we are also asked to be careful, right? Not to simply respond in whims in terms of our education. We have to understand the core competencies and things like that. But you have to do both. And that's what makes being in higher ed today both exciting and challenging is you're being asked to offer a consistent, high quality educational experience that somehow both has stability in a core, but also enough flexibility to kind of respond to a world that's changing as on a daily basis. And so I think that's where, being intentional about how we incorporate these technologies, being clear of the cost and benefits, like constantly talking with our students about, here's why there's good things in AI. And here's what you don't want to have AI do for you, right? And here's why you want to do the work yourself, and sort of continuing that sort of literacy, that literacy conversation with our students is really tremendously important, so that they understand that those kinds of tools need to be used and should be used to help accelerate their learning, not supplant their learning. And that distinction is a difficult one to full transparency.
Yeah, I think all of you, kind of in your opening monologue, took us so many places that could drive the entire conversation. But I think Dr. Marlera, you had said something about, one of the things that institutions can't do is they can't put their head in the sand, right? And I think then Dr. DiBiase, you also talked about employers as well. So I'm watching MSNBC this morning, and they're talking about companies are now hiring people that are utilizing AI or more open to utilizing AI. And it's not based on age, right? They're saying it's everything from boomers to Z, but it's more that willingness to be open-minded and utilize it. But then they also talked about how employees are using AI on their own. So, and I think both of you guys kind of made this point earlier too, like they're going to use it regardless. So they said they're literally coming into work utilizing AI, and they spoke about how some of the employers may not have the licenses or have it because they're not sure about the governance and what they can do or what they can't do. And then some even talk about them maybe not wanting to pay for the licenses. And then the lady spoke about the employees that are using it might not tell their employer because maybe something that's taking them 8 hours is now taking them 4, and they've got a little bit more free time at work. And it's like, well, if I tell the employer, then they'll know that I've got an extra 4 hours and maybe they'll put some more work on me, right? So it's like when you think about it, it's almost linear in terms of the work world and what's happening in academia in terms of, how you have to, manage it, roll it out, and then the maybe the lack of governance because it's so early in the process. So I think you guys both kind of introduced us to that in your opening pitch, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yes, I have heard there's new roles in the C-suite too that are just dedicated to this. I thought chief artificial intelligence officers, and there's companies that are trying to provide leadership to gather the thought leaders and the governing bodies that would then help guide the organizations forward, not only in their periods of exploration, but then later with adoption and then implementation governance. And so it's also really interesting what you're bringing up because it speaks to the fear around, oh, the robot's going to take away my job. And that was also some of our early conversation when ChatGPT was prominent in early 2023. And it raised the question of, well, what do you bring to the classroom that AI cannot? What is it that is specific to you as being human that is irreplaceable, no matter how advanced this AI becomes? What value add do you bring, in my world, to the classroom? But I think that question could be asked in many. What value add do you bring that AI could never achieve? And it kind of came down. We were talking at one point, and we brought it all the way down to elementary education, where if you're out on the playground and the kid falls down and skins their elbow, do you want a robot to come out and tend to them? Or do you want the human teacher to come out and tend to them? And unanimously, everyone wants the human to come out and tend to that skinned elbow or knee, on the playground. So there is this really interesting human element that we need to kind of, from that little idea right there of the skin, knee, and elbow. So what does that look like in the classroom and in the workplace, where that's what we bring to the table, and that's what's special. And so it's about that partnering. And again, and I feel what Dr. Collin, you're talking about in terms of the arts, because my English professors were, writing's finished, but it's maybe the conversation is, let's not talk about writing. How about we talk about revision? Maybe you do partner with AI and it writes, and you're the reviser. How do you make it better? How do you edit it? Because there are these base things in the Luddites, or those who said, oh, you're never going to have a calculator in your pocket. Now we all do. So it's the idea of, how do we partner with this and bring it forward. And so that's sort of where we have been evolving with some of those conversations, and continuing to think about it, of what we bring to the classroom, to the educational experience that is special and irreplaceable. And I'll stop there. So I don't know. I think you're bringing up some of the questions, Mara, that we're still grappling with. And so I'm just sort of continuing to flesh these thoughts out with you today.
And Dr. Morlayer, I'd like to share this specifically with you as you are involved with school, with creatives. I'm sure you've got a chance to see this week how AI really heated up trending news in music, right? Where one artist took another artist's work, or voice, if you will, and used AI in order to create new content, right? And in this case, it was Tupac, who we all know is fairly controversial, right? And seeing his family come out and say, hey, we think this is over the line, and threaten a lawsuit, just open up a whole other can of potatoes. The reason why this stuck with me is I actually thought it was great work. Not by the person who actually created that work. So I am super curious, Dr. Marlayer and Dr. DiBiase, how do you handle scenarios like these? I mean, I don't know where AI governance could step in at this point, particularly for private citizens. Obviously, in the academic scenario, yes. But what do you think about those scenarios and the power where AI could take us with situations like that?
And by the way, please, I should have started with this. Please call me Colin.
Okay.
So absolutely. I think, while I won't speak to how great that content was, because I don't want Tupac's family to come after me with copyright issues, so I'll leave that to you. But nonetheless, I think the thing, and then I did want to connect it back to something Christy said, because I think it's really important. But I think one of the things that is happening is fundamentally, and I started to talk about this when we talked about, Google and the internet and so forth and so on. One of the things that did was open up very sort of canonical core, definitions of ownership, authorship, and creator. It complicated sort of that notion for us, because, you would have, things like Wikipedia all of a sudden, and other things like that, where it's sort of, what does it mean to create ideas through a process of global collaboration, and who owns those ideas, and how do we, it really did open up that whole experience. And now I think connecting it back to actually something Kirsty said, and I hope it's all right, I'm using Kirsty instead of Dr. DiBiase. But
please do. Yes.
But going back to something she said is, what does it mean to have, two layers of that? What does it mean to have AI actually create something? What is that thing? Where has it come from? And you have all these lawsuits now and things like that. You have artists that are very passionate. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a whole movement to create. Somebody actually pushed out an AI, in a sense, defender, which creates an overlay on artistic imagery that's available on the web that's preventing other AI from actually scraping that content and using it for their AI. To say, I mean, we're in a new space. I think that the point that you're making is fundamentally the core definitions of true. And I don't want to overdo this, but we have AI now that can basically get a physical representation of a person to say or do anything that we want it to do based on an ingestion of something like, I think, 1 to 2 minutes of actual video content of that person. We have the ability to, hey, and I've seen stuff like this, which is, hey, I'd like you to remake a Roger and Hammerstein song from the 1800s, but use Biggie lyrics to do. I mean, that's what's happening right now. Is it's just this free play zone, and I think Chrissy said something about the play in it, which is a natural way that we explore sort of new technologies and their implications. Sure. But at the same time, that play is out there in the ether and being presented with actual reality at the same time. And so I think we're in the Wild West. We're in a place where we constantly have to be assessing and reassessing everything we do because the goalposts have shifted, is what I would say. And that's actually goes back to something Kirsty said, which is one of the calls to action from a higher ed perspective is, okay, and this is difficult and complex work that we're having to do. It's not bad work, but we have to go back and say, okay, what are the assignments and learning activities that we're going to build now that accommodate and take advantage to the fact that our students are using AI to make their content. So it goes back to, what are our outcomes? What are we hoping to see in our students? And now, instead of what are we hoping to see in that student's work, now we're saying, what are we hoping students see in their use of AI to synthesize and process their thoughts that they then submit for us? And that's a lot of work. So now we're going to go back through all of our courses, all of our assignments, and reconstitute them in this new world order. So exciting, authentic work, but it's also a lot. And it's a lot at a time where this isn't just the only thing that we as a higher ed institution are being focused on. It's sure. One more spinning plate. And so it goes back to that head in the sand thing. I think a lot of institutions, frankly, are saying, I can't deal with this right now. I've got all these other things focused on shared governance and so forth, not to minimize all of those, but there's all tuition costs and et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is you can't not deal with this too. And I think healthy academic institutions, and I think Kirsty touched on this, have the organizational culture to, in a sense, say, okay, bring it on let's add this to our ongoing discussions because we have to.
Absolutely.
I think it makes
that was an extraordinary point. And Kirsty, I'm gonna let you go. It just when you said that, it just reminded me of what I would say when COVID hit. And I was talking to my best friend and I was like, but everything else is still here. You can still catch the flu. You can still fall. You still got to go to work. And it's like, you get these new things that come and it's like, okay, life doesn't stop. Like every other thing that could possibly happen is still there and you got to work that in. So it just reminded me of that when you said that. It's like we got AI, but we still have the rest of everything else that we have to deal with. So I think it's an extraordinary time to be alive. I'm sorry, Kirsty, go ahead.
No, it's a great point. And that's what I was going to say. I think the institutions that are looking at this are people that they're going to be the differentiators in the market and the leaders that are having the courage to look and play and process and develop policy around these and not put their head in the sand will be the differentiating leaders, the institutions that are helping prepare competent graduates to be relevant now and to jobs in the future that we don't even know or it hasn't even existed yet. And so I think, I mean, you said so many things, Colin. There's so many great points that you made that I was just nodding and could comment on. So, thank you for all of that. But to answer your original kind of question, Darren, it's a reason why we're talking about this in higher ed. Why is the onus on us in higher ed to sort of get this organized? And I think that, and I've given this some thought, that I'm not sure that AI has a place in the K-12 or maybe K-8. I'd have to look at the 9 to 12, but because to a certain degree, you have to know who you are and what you think before you can engage at this level with this artificial intelligence. Sure. When you're just learning concepts, you're engaging too early with it. It's going to influence your thought, and you're not going to know who you are or what you think about something. Instead that you're going to be spoon fed and be taught. So there's that's why it has a better place in higher ed, because the students and the folks in higher ed come on the premise that we've already done some of that work and we're in advanced degrees, right? And so we are accredited by a sort of accrediting body, which has 5 core competencies, and our institutional learning outcomes fit off of those 5 core competencies, 2 of which are information literacy. Another one is critical thinking. So all of our student outcomes have to have those pieces in them. And so how do you foster critical thinking if you don't know how to think critically, which is that whole piece around being able to revise writing or identify a fake or make a song better or a paper better. And that's the partnership with artificial intelligence that can and should be happening in higher ed, in the workplaces, so we get our best products out in the world using the robots, partnering. I keep using the word partnering. It's not an us versus them. It's a partnership. And that's where we've been landing and talking. And so I was saying, how do we partner with these virtual assistants where they can do the low level work for me so I can do the more interesting higher order thinking skill work that is being demanded of me, and let this virtual assistant handle all this administrivia, if you will. Right? Absolutely. That's the human element I bring to the game, the skin me example, if you will. So I'm okay with that, and helping people feel comfortable to partner with the robot, that it's not taking anything away. It's not diminishing you. It's actually going to enhance you. And so that's a different mindset or paradigm to kind of get your head around. That can take some time, but I feel there's a strong reason why it's in higher ed and why it's our responsibility to be thinking about and talking about these topics, because it's our job. And if people are going to come to higher ed institutions for that advanced degree, and our heads are in the same, and we haven't grappled with some of these ideas and these big concepts, we left behind, and they will choose to go elsewhere, right? So,
and we're finding in engaging with students, their number one preference with AI solves something to do with time. Right. Mm-hmm. So as we all know, time and efficiency, right, is that bridge, right, that AI is now giving us all access to. And that is the typical, point of focus. How can I save time? And then when we really start to look overall at those student populations, which, don't look the same as they looked 20 years ago, working mothers, working fathers, parents, two jobs, right, just really fighting to get through school. So that piece to me, in terms of student success, would be an opportunity for a school to decide, okay, what type of AI product could we discuss that really might help alleviate some of the things that really contribute to the challenges and struggles of graduating. So we have sort of a unique approach where we're looking at student behavior student concerns, the things that impact student success, and really trying to understand where we would apply AI and for those particular facets, if you will, in order to change those scenarios. So that's kind of how we're approaching this at the moment. Don't necessarily know that this is the way that we will always do it, but in the name of the student, we felt like that's the greatest place to start.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it's all about what's going to help them be successful. That's why we're all doing what we do. And so I love your approach with the time lens. But Colin, I'm with you that I think that it actually, we also have to look at all of our assignments and level them up to help them. And that is the work. We have not completed that work. We have had some of the discussion board questions in our online courses. We've put some of them with ChatGPT. One of my ideas was, here's the discussion board question, put it into any generator. If you want predicted text generator, put it in there. And then whatever the answer is, the student engages with it and pulls it apart and finds the truth or argues with that answer that the robot has done. And that should be the discussion board question, rather than being upset that someone cheated and put that answer in there. Okay, so they put it in there. Now level it up. And I think
I love it.
Sort of that is that idea around all of our assignments. How do we level them up and make them not harder, but more intelligent for learning purposes and eventually student success? Like, that's the point. So.
Absolutely. One of the other trends that we're seeing with students is when they're using, AI-based tools like ChatGPT-3 or ChatGPT.
Right.
They'll type in, explain this to me like I'm in the 8th grade. Like this whatever the most difficult subject is ever, right? Explain it to me like I'm in the 8th grade. And I've seen some really cool responses come from that. Like, he instantly broken down so that the student not only understands the information, but more importantly to me, retains it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I love that, that your organization particularly is thinking about governance and how that can play out in the lives of better student outcomes. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Have you guys ever tried that, by the way, taking some foreign concept and explain it to me like I'm in the 8th grade?
I have. I've also taken a concept and asked the generator, you are an expert in fill in the blank, and then asked it to put things to the flip side to help with things. We've had it actually write our own our policy. When we were struggling to figure out what policy to write around the AI, we asked it to write the policy, and then we edited it, of course, to make sense for us. But
sure.
But we were sitting here, we were having this dialogue. We were all racking our head. Let's just ask the GPT, what did we write? So we did. We're like, hey, that's pretty good. And then we made it make sense for ourselves. And it was that partnership, and it was just really fun. So that's also part of it, is having fun with all of these EdTech advances that are coming out. One of the things we did is we are actually partnering. This is the metaverse, and this is immersive learning. I think is the more interesting conversation. Immersive learning, AI is a part of immersive learning, but we do tutoring inside of the metaverse, and we actually held our we have an interprofessional education day once a year, and we have all of our different students from the different programs, because I have 22 different programs at West Coast University, come together. We held it in the metaverse. So the students came in, and we're going to the conference, to the different, and the faculty were there, and they had engaged. We had over 300 students inside the metaverse engaging with the faculty representatives and the deans from all the different programs.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot of fun. We're doing it now, and we actually bought more space in the metaverse to expand that, and we're continuing to use the metaverse inside. We do tutoring in there. We're doing some clinical rotations in there. Just trying to figure out how to use that real estate to meet some of our outcomes as well. So
interesting. Wow.
I'm curious, did the AI's governance, did it lean strict, or was it more liberal and tolerant?
Ours right now is I'd call it more liberal and tolerant. It started out where they wanted to be very strict, and it came to one of the first things that was asked was, well, what threshold are we, what's our percentage that we're going to tolerate? They wanted to put a number on it. And then anyone who went over it went to conduct or was considered plagiarism, and we have to go down that road. And we still to this day do not have a percentage, and I'm holding out, and we shouldn't, because I don't think that's how we want to be judging this. We want to look at it with different eyes. It's not about hitting a number or not hitting a number. That's policy, right? That's not education. Now, if they had plagiarized the entire thing, that's what we became. And so that's where the onus goes back on the faculty. How do you know? Prove it to me that they used AI for the whole thing. How well do you know your students? How well are you talking to them? How is it different from the former writing? What is the burstiness? What did you do to promote or foster original work, right? So it kind of, I put it back on the faculty. They wanted me as provost to just write this policy and make their lives easier. Now it came up at 77% and they go to conduct. No, how do you know? Prove to me that they used it. Why are you saying that? And so putting it back and making faculty do the hard work. So we have a faculty statement around it. And we have, of course, something in the student handbook that if it does come up and it's completely plagiarized and we have validated it, then of course we have to go down that road. So I would call it more liberal, because we're using it and we actually have teachable moments built in. That first time it's a teachable moment, no one's going to conduct. Do it again, now we'll go down, because it's new. And we are an educational institution. So we don't want to be all stick, all punitive. Right. We're going to coach. Why did you use this? What did I miss in educating you that you felt you had to fall back on, that you were able to do this original work? That's on me as your faculty. How can I do this better so that you don't feel like you need to turn in something false?
Yeah. And I love the way you think about it too, just in terms of embracing and the adoption, right? Because I think so many people come from a perspective of fear, or almost like kind of laying down and letting AI do everything for us. So when you talk about leveling up and challenging, and I think ultimately it could make us more intelligent as a species, as well, if you kind of take that approach, which is really exciting. I'm curious. When we talk about AI, a lot of people say, hey, we're still in the first inning, right? We haven't even completed the first inning. With governance, I could make the argument that we're even further or earlier in the process than even AI itself. Would you guys agree with that statement? And how important, I guess, is the governance in terms of, do you think it could stop everything completely? Or if governance gets too far behind, will this whole thing kind of just get out of whack? Like one of those bad Wild West towns, right? And Wyatt Earp has to come and clean it up.
I think, if I may, I think, and Christy, there's so many things that you brought up that I'd love to respond to as well. And I really do love the idea. Actually, maybe I'll connect it to this notion of governance. I think we do. I think fundamentally and necessarily, governance is always going to be a little bit lagged from the current state. That's the reality, right? So, we enact structure and approach based on what's happening, right? And so there's always going to necessarily be that lag. I think, and I love what Kirsty said, which is, I think this is a differentiating gate in the sense that I think healthy higher ed institutions are going to respond to the call and take advantage of it. And I think unhealthy higher ed institutions are not. And you are going to see a difference in kind of long term. You're going to see a difference in the fates of those institutions. That's just a reality. But I think the other thing is, you have to have sound reasoning and approaches to do as much as you can to mitigate the negative impacts and take advantage of the positives. And so, for instance, one thing that I think Kirsty said that I think is really I think intriguing to me is, creating age limits around overall exposure. I love the idea of saying somebody who's K through 8 is really developing their own independent identity, and you can't really have AI mess with that until they have an established identity, so that they have an ego, in a sense, that guides AI versus sort of gets taken over by, and that's too much of an extreme example. But I mean, I think that's a really good point. I
love that point as well.
We have to have rules of the road. We have to. So I think it's okay that we're trying to catch up. I think that's just a natural function of the rapidity of technology change, and it's even accelerating. But at the same time, we got to do what we can. You got to say something today. And I think, we never got into this, but what we said institutionally, that I really like what we ended up doing as an approach. We said institutionally, we acknowledge AI's presence. We see it as something that is going to have a role for our students. And we are focused on the uses of AI that help our students in their learning, not supplant that learning. And then we have the department by department articulation of specific policies, really because different programs have different, the role of AI in liberal arts and writing and composition courses is very different than the role of AI as a creative sort of partner in photography and fine arts. Those are two totally different use cases. So all that to say, I think, it's natural for governance to be lag, but at the same time, it has to be doing everything it can to stay informed, to stay up to date, and to continue to look at this on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Colin, for that. Yeah, I while you were talking, I was thinking about, I wanted to read to you our charge and scope from our AI advisory committee. So here's how it states. The Artificial Intelligence AI Advisory Committee's charge is to explore and guide the integration of AI across the facets of the university. The AI Advisory Committee will focus on fostering innovation, forming strategic partnerships, and enhancing the use of AI in the classrooms and encouraging dialogue to shape the future of conversations and the trajectory of AI utilization. Below that, we have the 5 areas. We have play, partner, plan, ponder, 4 areas. Where's the 5th? We got rid of the 5th, 4 of our areas. The 4th one is ponder, and it's around ethical and social implications, which Colin was just mentioning. So we actually had 2 points under that one. But the very last piece we write is the AI Advisory Committee does not vote on or approve items, but rather serves as a think tank and support for innovation, partnerships, and the integration of AI in the classrooms and beyond. So it's a long statement. I read the beginning and the end for you. And that's sort of that's the premise on which. So I guess interpret it how you will, Kumar. Is that liberal? Is that strict? Right? We're trying to partner and integrate while still having, as Colin said, the guardrails that become obvious to us through the discussions. There are some that emerge that like, all right, this we can actually stand on and make policy or rule or whatever regulation that we're going to govern ourselves through. But for the most part, we've only done a couple of those. We don't have very many right now.
Well, I'm definitely second the motion of what you stated earlier in regards to sort of that age restriction. And I often think about now how difficult it will be for the next generation to even determine what is truth. There's a dark side of AI as well, in regards to deception. In fact, I saw a former president saying words he never said. and vice versa. I'm sure we've all seen examples of that. So I think that's another really important piece to this, especially through the governance lens of how schools, particularly K through 12, would handle that. I just realized that's going to be a serious challenge.
Yeah, Warren Buffett's, they had the Berkshire meeting, I think it was last weekend. And, he was talking about how, he's just nervous. He was like, could you imagine AI me telling people to come invest their money? And it was like, people just, just like, wow. And, so he said he was, kind of really concerned. So I think that one of the questions I like to ask is, when you think about governance, especially in academia, is it ultimately institution by institution, or do you think at some point there has to be, federal kind of guidelines that every institution abides by? How do you see that, or how do you think about that?
That gets into very, very complex areas, right? I would, and we're actually in the process of discussing this because the federal government is in the process of adjusting, I'll call it that, adjusting some of its perspectives and guidance and distance learning and things like that, which implicates both of us and our institutions and others. There is a role for the federal government, certainly as it concerns artificial intelligence at the national level, right? Absolutely. And, issues of, the role of entities and all that. I get all of that. Like, there is an appropriate role for the federal government. The federal government giving sort of granular guidance to the educational experience in higher ed is not where we should be as a collection of institutions. We are a country founded on an entire structure that says higher ed institutions have a mission, a mandate. We have a whole structure for acting in the best interests of our potential and active students and weighing in on what our educational system should be today and tomorrow. And I think that's the right role. We also have accreditors. I mean, Kirsty mentioned WASC, HLC, and there are examples where sort of everybody plays a role. So if we talk about, Title IX and diversity efforts is a good example. There's federal perspectives on those and expectations. There's accreditor roles and expectations, but there's also room for an institution still, even in that environment, to be able to best shape its own fate and understanding. And I think that's the right place to be.
Yeah, I agree. Well said, Colin. It is. I couldn't agree more. The only regulation, and maybe Kamara, this would be helpful, would be that we have distance ed and under our accreditor, under WASC, there is one compliance regulation that they mandate that you have to have a form of student verification to prove that the student that's doing the work in the distance ed is the student that says they're the student. So you have to be able to prove that. So whether it's two-factor, sometimes when there's exams, you've got cameras, but you have to have some sort of way where you're proving the verification and privacy. So already we have that one regulation, and I'm okay with just the one. I mean, there's a lot of other regulations under that in terms of distance ed, but I 100% agree with Colin that we don't want to get into the business of having something from the federal government mandating it, because that's exactly when I said at the very beginning, even in terms of policy, that my one single institution, I'm still writing things lightly and in pencil, being fully aware that it could all change tomorrow. And so we just want to be very careful with what we are regulating. But I think the one regulation around the institutions safeguarding and protecting that the work that is being submitted, we have a methodology to verify that it was that student and not that student's cousin or whoever else that could have possibly done it. So we do have some, but I think and that could lean towards the protection of the AI violations that could happen.
Got it. All right. Well, we got Kirsty coming back for another episode sometime in June or July. So we're really excited. Colin, you were amazing. We appreciate you joining us. We're definitely going to ask you to come back at some point too. You guys really balanced each other quite well. You guys want to give our audience any Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn? How can they find you? You got a book coming out or anything you want to share with the audience, feel free to do so right now.
I know. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. So for me, Colin, you have a book coming out? I don't have time right now.
I actually do have a draft of one, but it's been coming out for a ridiculous amount of time.
Okay, that sounds like
but you can find me on LinkedIn, and you absolutely cannot find me on TikTok or Facebook. So that's where you can find me.
I'm on LinkedIn as well. Yeah.
Well,
Darren, all of you. After today, I'm going to look for it.
Darren is regular with us. Darren, do you want to sign out with anything for the audience?
Sure. Just thank you all so much for having me. I'm Darren Thompson. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm working with artificial intelligence and machine learning to impact the way that students will learn forever.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. This was one of our best episodes. You guys were very, very insightful and very engaging. You guys enjoy the weekend. It was all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you all.
Thanks for tuning in to the Higher Ed Podcast. To learn more about the topics covered in this episode, please visit engine.systems. Be sure to join us again next week and every week thereafter for more cutting-edge insights and practical advice to help you stay ahead in the dynamic world of higher education.